Wow, oh my goodness, look at all of you here. I think either we made a mistake in the Republica program team distributing all the interesting content we have during this 1 hour across our 13 stages, or you were all just terribly excited about this next session, which I myself am excited to announce. So, from shifting the discussion around net neutrality to providing access to content across borders, Netflix has had a huge impact on the internet landscape. In cooperation with the Media Convention, we are very excited to announce the co-founder and CEO of Netflix, Reed Hastings, who's here with us today. Apart from doing his fair share in replacing the linear concept of television with Netflix, Reed Hastings is also a board member of Facebook and was on the board of Microsoft until 2012. I think that this fireside chat with Alina Fichter, who's a journalist and moderator with the Bayerischer Rundfunk, who's focusing on digital distribution, is going to be a really, really interesting next session. So please give a really big round of applause to Reed and Alina.
Thank you very much. As you can see, I'm not Reed. I'm talking to you in English because I'm going to say some introducing words, and you should understand what I say, I think. So, Reed Hastings founded Netflix 18 years ago as a DVD by mail service at that time. Today, Netflix has more than 60 million subscribers in more than 50 countries, and just back in September, it started its service in Germany too. Netflix also is the first internet company who really produced sophisticated content in the internet, and the first internet company who was awarded by Primetime Emmys in 2013. Since then, they got more and more prizes. So when you walk into the offices in Silicon Valley or LA, you can not only see popcorn machines popping corn all the time, but also glass cabinets with more and more Emmys in there. I think it's 10 right now, and it was 33 nominations. So when it comes to Netflix, it's very many first time off, etc. That's why I think that not another company name will be mentioned more often in this media convention of this year than Netflix, probably. When journalists write or talk about Netflix, they use big words like revolution of TV industry or entertainment history. If you could believe journalists, and I'm one as well, you would have to say that Reed is kind of the messiah of a new TV era. Reed, it's great that you made it to Berlin. I think it's one of the first times he's talking publicly in Germany, and if I understood him well, he wants to do some points he's never done before. Lucky us. Your stage, Reed. Welcome.
Thank you for coming out today. It's a real treat, and we've had so much support with Netflix in the last 6 months, all through Germany. I hope that many of you are members, but I hope many of you are not yet members so we can continue to grow too. I've been to a lot of conferences over the years, and I'm always amazed by how much bullshit there is. People saying how hard it was and how smart they were and how you got to hang tough and how you got to have persistence. And, you know, when I look back over my last 30 years, I can't believe how much luck there is in what goes on. So 30 years ago, I had no skills. I was a high school math teacher. I wanted to get into computer science. I was looking around for jobs. I took a programming class at night, and the only job I could get was serving coffee in a computer company's learning lab where they trained people. And by unbelievable fortune, this company turned out to be the very first company in the world to get a .com internet address, symbolics.com in 1986. I didn't plan it, but this company, now dead, was an early innovator in using the internet. And I got to learn things like FTP and Gopher and all of the tools of the early internet. Again, by incredible fortune, a few months later, I got into Stanford University in the Graduate School of Computer Science, but I had no background. It was a miracle that I got in. I think they said they wanted to get some people who had an unusual background because I had been a high school math teacher overseas. But I had never been to California. I grew up on the East Coast, and I knew nothing about California. I drove west, and I remember getting to the Stanford campus and thinking, where's the ivy? There's no ivy. How can this be a real school? I was so parochial. But the amazing thing about a center of innovation, like you're developing here in Berlin and like exists in Silicon Valley, is you meet people who had started companies. And over the next 2 years, I met lots of people who had been successful in starting companies. And my number one thought was, if they can do it, I can do it. Because before that, I had never known anyone who was successful in business. And they humanized it for me and made it seem not crazy and possible to do, to build a company. For the next couple of years, after graduating, I worked at a wide range of companies. I worked at a research lab. It was an AI research lab. I went to work for a startup for 2 years. It was a great experience. I was just an engineer, and I loved writing code. I was working all night long. I would see how many, the art of it was, could you program all night long and no one the next day could tell? Okay, that became the bar. If you had to not look tired and not look miserable. And it was very, we did amazing architecture and the code. And I remember a great lesson that I learned there, because I would, over the week, let the coffee cups build up. And every week or so, the janitor would clean all the coffee cups, so it wasn't a big mess. And one day, after about a year and a half of this, I came into work early. I was the only one there, I thought. I walked into the bathroom, and there were all my coffee cups getting cleaned in the bathroom at 5 in the morning. And there was my CEO of the company cleaning the coffee cups. Now it's 5 in the morning, and I hadn't yet had my coffee. So it took me a minute, really trying to understand. And I said, have you been cleaning my cups all year? And he said, yes. And I said, why? And he said, because you work so hard, and it's the only thing I can do for you. And I thought, my God, I will follow this leader to the end of the earth. And that's exactly where he led us. So what happened is we worked for 2 years with this great leader of people, but he didn't understand or wasn't able to do product market fit. And so we built an elaborate product, beautiful code, but only one customer ever bought the product, and they did not install it. And so I learned a good lesson there, which is leadership is both about connecting and humility and passion, but it's also about judgment, about being right, about the big bets. And took me 2 years of writing code to learn that lesson. But later, it really helped me. A couple years after that, I started a company, Pure Software, that made a C programming tool, Purify. And that company in the 1990s was a success. And every year, we got venture funding in 1992, but every year we had great products, but I really didn't understand selling to corporations, enterprise sales. And every year, I ended up replacing the VP of sales. 5 years in a row, 5 replacements. And yet the sales doubled every year. If I had just understood enterprise sales a little better, we probably could have tripled. But it gives you an example of partial goodness. In that case, I really understood product market fit, and the products that we built, the market loved. But I knew very little about leading a broad company and about a sales force in particular. But the luck, back to what I was talking about, gave me a chance to learn by doing. And during those 5 years, I got to learn a lot about organizational dynamics. Twice, I resigned from the CEO job to the board and said, we should get someone else to do this, and I'll be a VP of product. And twice they said, no, as bad as you are, and you are making some big mistakes, we want you to stay in this role. And then in 95, we went public, and we're very successful, and in 97, we got acquired. Now, when we got acquired, I was very disappointed because I was so ego-identified in my own eyes with the company and what we did that I felt like a failure. But it turned out to be the lucky break of a lifetime because a few months after getting acquired is when I started Netflix. And boy, the last 17 years have been the most fun professional experience I could ever want. For one, it's a consumer product, Netflix. It's so much more fun than an enterprise product like we had at Pure Software. 2, I didn't feel overwhelmed. In the first company, I always felt like I was screwing up. And so you feel guilty. You feel depressed sometimes. And with Netflix, we've been able to have the joy of first attacking Blockbuster and then TV as a whole. Now, our first battle with Blockbuster in the US was really quite challenging. We started in 97. In 2000, we were about 10 million in revenue. And Blockbuster was 5 billion, so 500 times larger. By the time we went public, we were 50 million in revenue, and they had grown from 5 billion to 6 billion in sales. And in 2004, they realized that this DVD by mail thing that we started was really going to catch on, and so they attacked, and they could subsidize. They could have lower prices than us because of the profits of the stores. So we had 4 years of brutal head-to-head battle for market share. We were the small guy, they were the big guy. We knew our business, they were trying to learn our business. And it was neck and neck. By 2006, you weren't sure who was going to win. Our stock dived. We were at 39, we went down to $9. But we stayed focused on what we were doing. We said, let's just keep making our service a little better, better integration with the post office, more selection. And bit by bit, we picked up momentum. And by 2009, Blockbuster had given up, withdrawn from this space, and a year later, they completely went bankrupt and disappeared. So our first battle was this amazing struggle where we won by being focused. So we said, as we get into streaming, we've got to really be focused. Our first streaming was in the US in 2007, so 8 years ago, and it barely worked. We had to install special Windows software and drivers and all the chaos that you guys remember 8 years ago. Then year by year, we made the service a little better, eventually browser-based. By 2010, we were getting some real momentum. And so we got brave and we expanded internationally. We went to Canada. And it doesn't sound like much, but if for 10 years you've been a purely domestic company, then you don't realize how many assumptions you have about what kind of business you are. So Canada was great for us. Right away, people started using streaming. It was our first time without DVD, with just streaming. So it worked so well that we said next year, let's expand into 30 countries of Latin America. We did that in 2011, and that worked so well that we said, we're done with DVD. And so let's split the company. Put the DVD in a new brand. It was still 80% of revenue and 100% of profits. But we were so excited about the future. We said that thing can be Quickster, and Netflix will be streaming. Because we said, we're the ones who are going to be so brave that we lean forward into what was going to be the long term. And the problem is, the customers were not yet ready for that much change. And what happened is they became very angry. We included a big price increase, so a 60% price increase from $10 to $16 in the middle, 2011, of the worst recession, in 100 years. So really, it was a catastrophically bad decision. And it almost killed us. And in hindsight, we realized the same bravery that allows us to be innovative is the bravery that almost killed us in that time. And that these things go hand in hand. And we have to realize that every now and then we're going to have a big error. We're going to have a big mistake. But we can't hold back from taking risk. It's much more fun to take risk. And we do it. So we got through that Quickster crisis. We started expanding in the UK and the Nordics, last year in France and Germany. And now, a year and a half from now, we're hoping to be completely global, another 150 countries, and to have Netflix emerge as the first global entertainment service for movies and TV shows, where we have a great catalog around the world, and we produce around the world. And through these years, we've realized the only way to have control of the shows, to be able to globally license, is to produce the shows ourselves. And my partner and colleague, Ted Sarandos, who runs our content group, he read the script for House of Cards 4 years ago. And we were in a bidding war 3 years ago with HBO for that title. We paid way more than anybody is supposed to pay for that title. And we had to hope that it's going to be epic. And indeed, it turned out to be the best decision we ever made. And through that, yes, the other room. Thank you. So House of Cards turned out to be this epic positive upon which we built Orange is the New Black, with season 3 coming up. We've got a reel for you in a minute with some of the highlights of our newest shows. So it's been a tremendous progress. So I thought what I would do before we go to the Q&A is just give you a little preview of what the next 20 years will bring in television. Sometimes things are very stable, and then they change a lot. So 5,000 years ago, up in the high plains of Kazakhstan, the horse was domesticated. And for the next 5,000 years, the horse was our primary means of personal transportation throughout the world. So it would be easy 150 years ago to say the horse is a permanent part of human society. We were completely intertwined. We had been together for 5,000 years. It certainly seemed like humans and horses would be together forever. And then came the automobile. And in just 50 years, horses, they're now a pet for rich people. So when the automobile transformation happened, people did say, think about what we're losing. We're losing a connection with another animal. All of us 150 years ago would have been really good at taking care of horses, and now none of us are. So with every bit of progress, there is some loss. Now let's think about linear TV. Developed around 1930, got big in 1950 in black and white, and then in 1960 and 70 in color. 1980s and 90s brought cable and satellite in addition to broadcast television. But it's all linear TV. A show is on at 8 o'clock. That's not when you want to watch. And we will come to see that linear TV declines every year for the next 20 years. And that internet TV rises every year for the next 20 years. A lot like mobile phone over the fixed line telephone. The advantage is with internet TV, or you can watch it when you want. You can watch it on any screen. It's personalized, it's customizable. You can watch it with any combination of subtitles and dubbing that you want. It seems so simple, and yet most current linear networks, they think the internet is a fad that might hopefully go away. And in fact, what you all see is that the internet is going to become the basis for all social interaction, and we're all building applications on top of that internet. And so year by year, linear TV will shrink, even with sports. So in the next World Cup, many of you will have 4K televisions, and you'll want to watch the World Cup in 4K. But broadcast and linear and cable will not be able to provide you a 4K signal. But instead, it will come over the internet. And much of the world will watch the World Cup in incredible video quality over the internet. Of course, shows like Orange is the New Black will be over the internet. You'll be able to watch them anytime. You'll have many choices between ad-supported models like YouTube and commercial-free models like Netflix. And the television screen will look like a large iPad. Take an iPad and stretch it out 2 meters wide. It'll be like that, where there's all different applications, all different options, all competing for your time and attention and improving. And the amount of innovation over the next 10 years in terms of internet video will be astounding. It's 2015. 10 years ago, 2005, there was no iPhone. So the entire smartphone revolution has happened to date just in 10 years. So now we have to wonder, what about the next 10 years? What will that bring in hardware innovation, in virtual reality, and incredible immersive screens, and screens in the home, and screens in your pocket? The internet will get so much faster, fiber to every household that has electricity. All of this will happen over the next 10 years, propelling and driving internet video. So the existing networks, they're quickly trying to adapt to the internet. The BBC was one of the first with the BBC iPlayer, and now much viewing of the BBC is over the internet. And that's what's happening to each network. They're moving from linear to embrace the internet, and you'll have more and more options on your smart TV or on your phone as all video moves to the internet. And what we're excited about is as we produce for the internet, how can we do this in non-conventional ways? Certainly we can make TV shows like everybody else, but on the internet we ought to be able to make TV shows that can't be done on linear. We ought to be able to play with the formats, with interactivity, with length of episode, with plot twists, to do amazing things and entertainment and engagement that's never been done before. And over the next 5 and 10 years, as we get fully global, we hope to pioneer much of that. We're also now expanding in production. We're producing a show in Mexico about a rich family that owns a football team. The parents die, and of course the kids fight in crazy ways over the football team. Now, it's targeted at Mexicans, and it's going to be amazing in Mexico, but I think the whole world is going to enjoy it. We've got another show in Bogota, Colombia about the history of cocaine that Jose Padilla is doing for us. We've got another show in Marseille, France that's about corruption in the mayor's office and the family dynamics. We're expanding around the world producing shows because ultimately what we want Netflix to be is to connect the world, to use the internet to connect the world so the world's best storytellers can get to a global voice. So there's no better place than this conference to celebrate global voice. So it's a real treat for me to be here. And now we're going to open it up for an interview and questions and answers.
Great talk. Thanks a lot, Reed. That was a good starting point, I think. But still, I think we have lots of questions. And I'd like to start immediately with the first one. You were talking about linear television and linear television descending, etc. And once you said it will survive 20 years with event programming like football. You just mentioned it. And I'd like to know, what will the video industry look like? Will the Albanian army, as you were called, take over?
Netflix is really focused on movies and TV shows. There'll be other companies and other brands that come to represent user-generated, like YouTube. Sports will probably be by league. So the NFL will do their sport. The Cricket League is getting big now. Football will be its own sport. And you'll go to basically think of it as the application for the league was where you'll get sports. So each of these specialist applications will have a very rich experience for fans. And in that world, there'll be new sports, and we'll try to be movies and TV shows. That time when you want to relax and enjoy a story from somebody else.
What about information?
Well, information will be, that's so broad. That'll be part Wikipedia, part documentaries. I think a lot of people will be in that.
But not TV companies anymore. They will be like fax machines, like not used anymore.
Yeah, sometimes I say that linear TV is like the fax machine. That, in the 80s and 90s, the fax machine was amazing. But, then you started attaching files on documents, and the fax machine was not so amazing. And linear TV, it completely transformed societies and has been incredibly powerful. It's just that now there's something better, internet TV.
Okay. So you, just to get that precisely, you think TV companies are not necessary for people to get information, right? That can be anyone giving information to them.
Well, there'll be many innovative providers, but current TV networks, some will succeed in a big way by converting to the internet and becoming great internet video companies, and I'm sure some will fail at that. But the great thing about the internet is if you can build an app for the iPhone or for Android, you can be a TV network. Okay, the barriers to entry are dropping dramatically. And so that's going to allow a lot more voices to be heard.
So what would you say, what is your biggest rival? Is it internet companies? Is it HBO? As Ted Sarandos, your content chef, said, we need to become HBO more quickly than they become us.
HBO is an incredible company because they've been doing great content around the world for a long time. But on a global basis, we really compete with linear TV. And our co-pioneers are Amazon and Hulu and HBO and many other companies that are also doing internet TV. So all of us, think of all of the apps in the internet TV ecosystem help create internet TV awareness, and we're all competing with linear TV.
In the introduction, I mentioned it. It was a big hype in Germany, as in many other countries, when you started your service there, I think. And so with a big hype, there are big expectations coming, and then there was a big disappointment because the Netflix service in Germany doesn't really show very many things. So why become a subscriber in Germany?
Yeah, we call that the Spotify effect. So people want Netflix to be like Spotify is to music, to have all the content, even if it had to be more expensive than it is. And we want that too. But music grew up with non-exclusive licensing. So every radio station could play every song. That's how the business grew up. So then the internet services like Spotify can follow that non-exclusive model. TV shows grew up with TV networks. And every network that exists is exclusive and tries to block Netflix. So HBO has content, they don't let us have it. BBC, they don't let us have it. And so unfortunately for consumers in video, it's all exclusive. And what we have to do is to create our own content to be able to provide that rich experience across the board. And so it's this historic industry structure that then creates that initial disappointment. And the way we try to make up for that disappointment is with great pricing. So Netflix is only €7.99 a month. And then with great content, like our new Daredevil series.
You are doing great content, like House of Cards, but then Sky shows it, not Netflix in Germany.
Yes, in House of Cards, that's an unusual one. It was our first series, and we could only afford it in the US. We couldn't buy the global rights. So it's an anomaly that's unfortunate, but Sky does a great job with it. I mean, people get to see it. But the other originals that we're doing are all with Netflix around the world. So House of Cards is a bit of a special case.
Okay, we hope to get to see it, even though we're not Sky subscribers, but Netflix subscribers.
Well, on Netflix,
Germany.
you do get House of Cards. We have season 1 and 2, and we'll have season 3 shortly. So just not the first window. It's a little disappointing, but it is what it is.
Good. Another point that disappointed some of us in Germany is that when you stream it, for example, in hotels or in a public space or something, it's really not like, oh, you have to wait and you want to go on, but it doesn't really work. So why don't you offer downloads, for example, just for a short period?
Well, what we're figuring out is that people really love simplicity. So if you look at the problems with large software like Microsoft Office, every feature in Microsoft Office, somebody wanted at some time. But what happens is over 10 or 20 years, the thing gets so huge, it's overwhelming. So the discipline of great product design is to figure out what are the important cases for the long term and to have the discipline to say no to some things that are good. It's easy to say no to things that are bad, but great product design is saying no to some things that are good. And we look at it and say the complexity of downloading is you have to do it in advance, you have to store the file, you have expiration, you have all this complexity. And in the long term, the networks are going to get fast enough that streaming works everywhere. So that's why we're betting forward in that dimension, even though it is a little disappointing in the short term.
You might be overestimating Germany in those terms because, we have many areas where internet is so slow that you can just forget about streaming, and it's like in a few years that probably you might be able to stream. So why not offer it to us, analog Germans?
Well, as slow as it might seem to you, Netflix is very successful in Mexico and Costa Rica, and the internet is more difficult there. So you really do have, compared to the rest of the world, your internet's in pretty good shape. It may not be perfect. But I know, being here in Germany, you have high standards.
Not everywhere. In Berlin, yes, but in the areas around, not so much. You just offered in the year 2015 320 hours of original content, I read. And I'd like to know, would you agree that the hit rate becomes smaller? You know, we had House of Cards, and then we had Orange is the New Black, and now what do we have?
Sense8? Oh my God, when you guys see Sense8 coming out in 2 months, the Wachowski siblings did this for us. It will shock you. Believe me, it will shock you. So I think that's going to be one of our most epic content ever. BoJack Horseman, incredible anime, dark, and it's not like anime. It makes Family Guy seem tame. So I would say our best work is still coming out. And every year we want to do more and more incredible work. Now some of it should fail, because otherwise we're not trying hard enough. But so far, every show has been great for some audience, and so we've taken it to season 2.
Do you think so? I haven't seen Sense8, of course, but I saw Better Call Saul, and there was like a huge hype, etc. And I found it boring, and in the reception it was quite boring. Not you?
This is what you find about taste, is it's not uniform.
Exactly.
Okay? So if you were to poll everyone of their favorite shows, not everyone would choose House of Cards. Mm-hmm. That's a very elite show for some people, but many people love the other shows even more. And human taste, we should celebrate its variety. And so, you know, for Better Call Saul, it's great for some people. They absolutely love it. Other people like Daredevil more. Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, you know, if you're into Manhattan and that Tina Fey thing, it's great. So thank you. So again, that's
one of your favorites, right?
Yeah, it is. It's one of my favorites, but that almost doesn't matter, because the beauty of the internet is it can be personal. We can make content for kids, all different tastes. We've got a new show, Grace and Frankie, that's coming out, starring Lily Tomlin and Jane Fonda. And it's really for older people that grew up with them, and they'll appreciate it. So think of it as there's no one show that has to get big. The internet is about diversity and taste.
Okay, so data. You're like a little bit like the brain works. You have a right hemisphere and a left hemisphere, one like data-driven in Silicon Valley, and then the content-driven in LA. So what role do data play for the content you make?
Sure, data is misunderstood because people say big data is so amazing, it should do everything. And that's really not true. What we say is you should use data to pick stocks, but you should use your judgment to pick a spouse. And they're really different fields. The more emotional an area is, the more you want to trust your judgment. The more analytic an area is, it is very useful to use data. So we try to use data, for example, in marketing the shows, seeing which types of ads people respond to. But with the creators, we never do that. We tell the creators they've got to follow their artistic vision and not try to work for the data. They need to work for their vision, and then we'll use the data to promote it to the right audiences. Okay. So you really do, with big data, want to be clear about what parts of your activities that you want to use data for. Okay,
so what you do use data for is for personalization, right? I had the privilege to talk to the head of personalization at Netflix when I visited you there, and he had a vision. He said in 5 years he would like that one of you comes home, opens the app of Netflix, and the app already knows what you want to watch, even though you don't know it yet.
Right, I trust Netflix, play some show, right?
Exactly. Like the mood, everything is in the app and known. That seems kind of frightening too. Like, what are you doing with my data? And isn't that a little bit Big Brother-like?
Well, some things are frightening, like, for example, traffic. And the fact that you can see where there's traffic and now steer around it. Well, remember, that means that they can read where you are too. And, so on one part it is frightening, and in another part it's incredibly valuable once you start using it to be able to see where there's a lot of traffic and to be able to steer around it. And as a society, we're all trying to figure out, what are acceptable uses of data. But one of the easiest cases is to help you find good shows that you're going to love, since clearly not all of our shows are to your taste.
Exactly. Another thing I'd like to ask you is, because not only your shows are interesting, but your company culture is too. The 124 slides you put into the internet in 2009 were called the most important document of the Silicon Valley by Sheryl Sandberg. And I'd like to know, now that you're becoming bigger and bigger and you're not the underdog anymore, how do you try and keep innovative?
Oh, we are so much the underdog. So our content budget is about $3 billion. And ZDF just here is 8 billion euros. Okay, and then you add NHK and BBC and NBC and Sky. And when you look at how much is spent on production around the world, we are such a tiny fraction of the global entertainment market. So to answer your question, when you feel successful, then you reframe the lens in which you compete so that you're always the underdog.
Okay. And how do you do that exactly?
Well, you have to be creative on it. So if you're Coca-Cola, first you're competing for sugar water.
No, I mean you. How do you do it?
How do I do it? I'm always thinking in the scheme of history how small our efforts are. And I try to read a lot of history, and I think that keeps me grounded. Even though we try really hard, we're passionate about what we do, that in the long term, we're making, still very incremental contributions.
How important is the fact that you don't have an office?
Well, many people in the audience don't have an office. You work in a communal space, and I suppose it's only novel for a large company CEO, but I've lived for the last 5 years without an office. And what I like about it is it keeps me visiting other people throughout our offices, because I'm going to them rather than them coming to me. So it makes me more approachable and less imperial. So that's very helpful. But the other secret part about it is I can go home early and no one notices, okay? Because my office isn't empty, so they don't go to they think, oh, we must be meeting with someone. So they just call me, I pick up the phone, and I'm at home. Works out well.
That's very clever. So
don't tell anyone.
Okay, no, I won't, I promise. So one last question before we open it up to the audience. It's the slides we were talking about, or your company philosophy is called Freedom and Responsibilities, and it's a bit higher and fire philosophy too. And I'd like to know, what picture of mankind do you have? Why do you do this? It seems so brutal, like when you don't perform, you just go.
Yeah, we're like a professional sports team, and we want to win a championship in our area. And we're very honest with people that it's about performance. It's not about seniority. It's not about politics. And working at Netflix, it's like being on an Olympic team, and it's really hard. But you do your best work when you're surrounded by people who are really talented and try hard. And so we try to be very respectful, but it's fundamentally about performance for us. And we try to be clear about it because it's not for everyone. We want people who join Netflix to know how we operate, and the professional sports team is the closest analogy.
Okay, thank you. There are so many other subjects really interesting, I think, net neutrality or geo-blocking, etc. But I think it's really important to open it up to the audience. And firstly, I'd like to know how many subscribers do we have here? Could you raise your hand?
Oh, that's scary. That's too many.
Now I would like to
Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to see as many hands as I just saw with questions for Reed, please. Over there, the lady, please.
There's a mic.
There is
right
a microphone coming. Thank you.
And then maybe are we going to close with a reel? We should try to close with the original reel.
First of all, thank you so much for your talk. I'm particularly interested in the future of television, as you mentioned. How big a part do you think augmented reality is going to play in that?
So for everyone, the question is, how big will augmented reality play in the future of television? So virtual reality is when you're immersed in another world. And that's the kind of beginning to be the current generation. And then augmented reality is like Google Glass, where you see the world, but it's got some augmentation. And we're in the very early stages as a society in figuring out both the biology of how to do augmented reality well, how to be able to see images in a safe way, what that means. And so to answer your question, I don't know. I know it'll be an incredible adventure over the next 20 years. And if you think about the internet, you know, you could see the internet 20, 30, 40 years ago, but it took a long time for it to get mature enough to be important to society. And I think with augmented reality, it may be like that, which is it may be 10 or 20 years in the lab and thinking through and trying very specialized things like a pilot before it becomes really mainstream.
Couldn't you do the first German original series in augmented reality, probably?
Well, we could, but no one can see it then, because no one has an augmented reality device.
When will the first one come? A German series,
I mean, Google Glass was the first one.
No, I mean German original content.
We're definitely looking for German original content. As I mentioned, we've got other productions throughout Europe and the world, but we haven't found one yet.
Okay, good. So let's go on. Over there.
I'd just like to ask about geo-blocking. The European Commission is proposing that people, let's say a Netflix subscriber in the UK should still be able to watch their content while they're in Germany. What do you think of that? And what do you think also of a wider end to geo-blocking? Some people think the Commission's not going far enough. They think somebody in Germany should be able to subscribe to UK Netflix. What are your thoughts on this?
Good question.
So the Commission is dealing with a great frustration that people have of the balkanization of content, you know, within a single market. And we can't wait for the Commission. I mean, they may or may not pass rules. When they pass rules, it's years to take effect. And so what we're doing about it now is trying to do all pan-European and indeed global licensing so that everybody can get to all of our content. And we don't have situations like House of Cards that's available in the UK but not here. So we're trying to solve it commercially. They may take action and may make it easier, but there's always a long time for government to act. And we can take the leadership on it by providing that broad content to everyone.
Okay. Another question over there, please.
I would like to know what's your point on net neutrality. I know that Netflix has made deals with internet providers in the US for better peering. Do you think this is an absolute necessity or a deal with the devil?
The latter, a deal with the devil. So our view is the internet should be open to us, to our competitors, that consumers are already paying for the internet. So when you pay 30 euros a month for 50 megabits, you deserve 50 megabits to anywhere you want to go. Some of the ISPs think that they should double charge and charge the supply side like YouTube and Netflix and others at the same time. And we don't. We say we should supply the content. We're not using the pipes. In fact, the consumers, all of you, are choosing where to go. And it should be open with free interconnect for all of the service equally. So we don't want any special deals. Now in the US, a year and a half ago, the ISPs were not allowing our bits through, and our average stream quality had gone from 3 megabits down to 1.5 megabits on some networks. And so we ultimately felt like we needed to do a deal to stay in business. And so we did those deals. And the US at that time had no net neutrality rules. Now what's happened with Title II in the US is there's a stronger basis. So we wouldn't have to do those deals. They're still in effect. But new people who want to compete with Netflix don't need to do it. Now in the EU, it's net neutrality is in a less formal state. But there's also been fewer problems so far for us and other people. So I think it's going to work out fine. That is, consumers want the internet. to be a utility. They want it to be like electricity, where they don't have to worry which company they use for connectivity. They can still get to whatever services they want in a nice and safe and confidential way without any interference. So the key thing is this utility aspect, to be like electricity.
But then if, I'm sure you saw the net neutrality thing John Oliver did, right? What about the underdogs? If you're using 30% of the internet connections, what about Netflix, as John Oliver said?
Well, there's lots of room for other companies. We're using 30% in the US of the residential internet, but it's not a fixed quantity. So if there was 2 more Netflixes, it would just expand, and then we would only be 10%.
One over there, please.
Hi, my name is Mugethi. I work with supporting entrepreneurs in Nairobi. So a lot of people have asked you questions about Netflix, but I want to ask you a question about you. And all the times you pivoted and like made major changes to Netflix, what was your scariest moment? What was your most scary moment?
Scariest moment? Oh, wow, that's a... House of Cards has worked out so well that but at the time, it was over $100 million. It was, a large part of our budget. We had never done original content before. We debated it back and forth. We almost didn't do it. We thought, what if we can't pay for this because the business doesn't grow? At the time, that was an intense debate, and we almost didn't do it. So that was the scariest.
Just a hint for the last questions we're going to take. Reed is not only a very interesting entrepreneur, but also a very interesting person. He dropped out of the Marines to go to the Peace Corps in Africa, actually, and many more things like that. So personal questions are welcome too.
Yeah, welcome. That's nice of you to say.
I'm the one who decides. Over there.
Hello, Mr. Hastings. I'm sitting here behind the camera guy. I read that Netflix is planning on a live-action series of the video game The Legend of Zelda. Can you tell us something about this project?
There were some rumors that we were going to do a video service, a show based on the big Nintendo game Zelda. And what happens in Hollywood is if you want to sell a show, you plant a rumor that Netflix is going to do it, because that gets all the other people to be serious and bitter. So you have to discount a lot about what you read. And remember that the agents who sell shows are always planting these things to try to build attention.
So one last question. The lady here.
Hello. You just shared your appreciation of variety and diversity. And you also said you're producing a show in Mexico and another one in France. Do you take measures to encourage diversity in the series that you're producing globally? Or, on the contrary, do you want them to be recognizable as Netflix content?
We want our shows to be known as Netflix content, but not to have any one style. So traditional linear networks, they have to specialize for one demographic or one style. And with Netflix's personalization, we can be incredibly broad. And that's a great segue. If we're able, are we going to be able to run the video? I think so. So looks like we got a short clip here, a minute and a half of the highlights of some of our original content. There'll be a great finish, I think, for all of you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a real treat to be here.
Thank you, Reed.